I like to be active. I like to do things. That's why I chose this job. And I think health means being in the kind of shape mentally and physically where you can do things.
Having a family, when you go home at night and your children are still active and ready to go, you're not beat. You're ready to go with them. You have energy and time to spend with them.
Feeling healthy, feeling strong gives one a great sense of well-being. But beyond that, there's a sense of approaching most things you do with a more vigorous approach.
Health. What is health? For most of us, health is simply the lack of disease. We figure that if we feel okay, we're probably healthy. That definition is acceptable as far as it goes, but it only gets us up to neutral. For this film, we would like you to think of health as plus 10. We're talking about a positive state that might be described as optimum physical and mental health.
Here, thanks.
Positive health means having the energy to work without chronic fatigue. It's also a resilience or resistance to disease that gives you a reserve to draw upon in a time of stress. It means having endurance, strength, and flexibility. More basically, positive health simply means feeling good. A much broader definition of health concerns your long-term prospects for well-being. And here again, it's a question of lifestyle. Let's take a look at the diseases which are most likely to affect your future health. We are no longer dying from infectious disease, yet medical science can do little to prevent the lifestyle diseases which are killing most of us today. The prevention of these diseases is largely up to you. Not your doctor, not your employer, not the government. It's a matter of deliberate choices in how you live your life. A perfect example of a lifestyle disease is a condition called atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis is a progressive deterioration of the arteries caused by fats and blood clots in the form of plaques, which build up along the walls of the arteries. These deposits build over a lifetime, causing the arteries to become hard, inelastic, and eventually blocked. The heart muscle is fed by coronary arteries. When these become blocked, a portion of the muscle starves for oxygen, throwing the heart into a spasm or fibrillation.
When I first saw Bill Anderson 9 months ago, his electrocardiogram showed a dangerous pattern indicating that some part of the heart muscle was being starved of oxygen due to narrowing of his coronary arteries.
I never used to take health seriously. In fact, when I was younger, I was quite an athlete. I felt that nothing could faze me. About 9 months ago, I was forced to think about my health. I'd been out in my garden spading, and I couldn't even finish it. Later that evening, I experienced chest pains and became very, very scared. That experience shook me up enough that I decided to do something about it.
I guess, like many of us, Bill had slipped into a pattern of living which was dangerous in terms of the development of heart disease. For example, he smoked a pack and a half of cigarettes a day. He didn't do any exercise, was leading a sedentary life. He was eating the wrong foods, rich in fats, sugars, salts, had gained 40 pounds in weight, and on top of this was also under significant stress at work. There is now mounting evidence to indicate that this kind of pattern of living is the major cause of heart attack. But there is hope. We have seen examples time and time again where the necessary lifestyle changes have been made, as Bill has done, and the risk of succumbing to a heart attack have been significantly reduced.
You know, when I first came to the doctor, he wanted to change everything I was doing, my whole lifestyle. And when I look back, I would have never thought of coming to a beach early in the morning and walking. But you know, after 9 months, I'm beginning to feel better.
What's important about atherosclerosis is that we can probably influence its development by altering the two major factors which cause atherosclerosis, namely high blood pressure and increased fats in the blood. If we eat a great deal of fatty foods, there will be more fat in our blood, higher cholesterol, higher triglyceride. And we know that stress is a very important factor in causing these fats to be increased. With high blood pressure, we know that a number of features in our lifestyle can contribute to the development of high blood pressure. Stress is a very important one. Lack of exercise is another. Our weight, the heavier we are, the higher our blood pressure. Salt has been implicated. And smoking is yet another factor which influences blood pressure. And all of these can be very important in perhaps preventing this rather common and ravaging disease.
If our current lifestyle does not change, half of us will die from heart attacks or strokes caused by atherosclerosis. But fortunately, this does not have to happen. We know from studies in other countries and among subcultures in our own country that cardiovascular disease is not inevitable. It is not a matter of blind fate. It is a matter of avoiding certain risk factors. The most important are smoking, dietary excesses, lack of exercise, overweight, chronic stress, and alcohol abuse. Now that we have established the connection between lifestyle and health, we are left with the question, how do you begin to reduce these risks? How do you control fat in the diet, begin to get some exercise, lose weight, or learn to manage stress? These are the subjects for the rest of our film.
My family has a history of heart disease. My grandparents and an uncle died when they were 50. And to me, that's young. That's middle age. I plan to be around for a lot longer than that. So we started doing some reading on the relationship between heart disease and nutrition. And suddenly nutrition wasn't dull anymore. It was a personal item. It was related to us. The things that kept coming up were fats, especially animal fats, salt, and sugar.
It wasn't just the heart attacks that were bothering us. We kept hearing over and over again about a possible linkage between certain types of foods and different types of cancer. But coming from a background of meat and potatoes, I wasn't sure I was willing to change my dietary habits.
You certainly hear enough about what not to eat. And it can kind of leave you with the feeling of what's left. It is a challenge finding new foods that the whole family will accept and enjoy. But before we get into that, let's take a look at what we used to eat. I always prided myself in putting good meals on the table.
Breakfast has always been my favorite meal. I'd always start off with some type of a breakfast meat, either sausage or ham or bacon, something with a lot of fat and salt in it. I'd usually have a couple eggs, sometimes even 3. And I'd have toast with lots of butter again and some type of jam or jelly on it.
Lunch revolved around convenience and what the kids liked. Bologna sandwiches, which are high in salt and fat, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. We discovered when we started to read labels that there are a lot of hidden sugars and salts in the diet. For instance, peanuts are listed first, and then sugar and salt are the second and third largest ingredients. There would be cookies for a treat, which are again high in sugar, whole milk, which is high in fat, and some fruit. Dinners centered around meat, perhaps pork chops, hamburger, a steak for a treat, all fatty cuts. Potatoes.
With cobs and butter.
A tossed green salad with a bottled dressing. Once again, a source of sugar and salt. Prepackaged convenience vegetables, which I tended to overcook. Whole milk, and a dessert.
Individually, many of these foods are nutritious, and a lot of them really taste good. But unfortunately, as they are taken together here, comprising the meal for a family for a day, over 40% of the calories come from fats, and there's over 5 times the salt that you need in your daily diet.
As we learned more about nutrition, we discovered we could make changes. They came about gradually. We didn't make any of these changes overnight.
One of the first things we did was 1 or 2 nights a week, instead of having red meat, we substituted chicken or fish for our main meat source.
And beans and peas and lentils are an excellent source of inexpensive protein.
One of the easiest ways I've found to avoid a lot of the hidden salts and sugars is by substituting fresh fruits and vegetables for those same products that I'd normally buy in packages and cans.
We're adding more whole grains in our breads and cereals. We've also become convinced that fiber is an important part of diet. So we're adding bran to our cereal, pancakes, and meatloaves. We're reducing our fats by changing to low-fat milk, yogurt, and cheeses. We're drinking more juices and more water. These changes came about slowly for us. We've been working on it for a couple of years. What we do was add maybe 1 or 2 new foods a week, and experimenting like that can be kind of fun.
We all know what causes stress in our lives. Major life changes like marriage, divorce, death of a spouse, moving, a promotion or loss of a job, and money worries. And day to day it may be smaller things like noise or criticism or too much to do in too little time. It can even be a very positive event like a vacation, Christmas, or the birth of a baby.
What is not so well understood is how stress works on the body and the direct link between chronic stress and disease. Long ago, we evolved a natural response to stress which typically progresses through 3 stages: alarm, action, sometimes called fight or flight, and relaxation. In the alarm stage, when a situation places unusual demands on our bodies, we respond with instant biochemical changes that enable us to take action.
Mikey, look out!
These changes have great survival value.
The problem is our bodies respond with the same alarm mechanism to the daily stresses of modern living, but we rarely have the luxury of outright fight or flight.
Have you been to the desk today?
We would lose if we responded to criticism with a punch in the nose,
Listen, what about the one for $700?
or ran out of the room when the noise level got too high.
So many of us short-circuit the natural stress response by remaining in a perpetual state of semi-alarm or anxiety.
Heart rate and blood pressure are constantly elevated. Adrenaline levels remain high. Blood sugar levels are up. Stomach acidity is increased. Muscles remain tense, ready for action. Constant stress also seems to break down the immune system. And like any mechanism run constantly at full throttle, we begin to burn out. The machinery starts to break down. The result is disease.
Again, we are faced with the question, what do you do about it? How do you cope with chronic stress? The answer is to play out the natural stress response. Substitute exercise for the action stage and build some relaxation into your life.
Relaxation response is the counterpart to the fight or flight response. As a cardiologist, I became interested in how stress might be affecting the development of atherosclerosis. What we did was to then study techniques which people claimed reduce stress, and we studied various meditational techniques. What we found was that the practice of these techniques lead to an innate bodily response, the relaxation response. And indeed, the relaxation response, when practiced regularly, does alleviate stress and its consequences. The instructions are simply these. Sit quietly in a comfortable chair. Close your eyes. Relax all your muscles, starting with your feet, your head, your neck, your shoulders. Just let everything go loose. Pay attention to your breathing, but breathe slowly and naturally. On each out breath, say silently to yourself the number 1. Now, other thoughts will come into your consciousness. These other thoughts are natural and should be expected. But when they occur, and you become aware of them, simply say to yourself, "Oh well," and passively come back to the number one. And when you finish, sit quietly for a moment or two, and then slowly open your eyes, leaf through a magazine or sit quietly, and then slowly get up.
We have demonstrated a method for relaxing and lowering blood pressure in the face of life stress. In many cases, it is realistic to adapt to the inescapable pressures we all face. You cannot wish them away. On the other hand, there are times when it is perfectly appropriate to confront the source of stress head-on and eliminate it by restructuring your life. The goal is quality, to do fewer things and do them better. People who handle stress well tend to find a time for solitude, even if only a few minutes a day. Build humor and play into their lives. Have close bonds with family and friends. Have absorbing pastimes. Tolerate a certain amount of frustration and disorder.
I really don't think this says what we wanted to say.
Handle criticism without falling apart.
Okay, why don't we get together after lunch and we...
Unschedule their lives when things get too hectic. And a lot of people who handle stress well exercise.
Actually, I started running because of my health. I was 45 years old and out of shape, and I weighed about 190 pounds, and I had a physical exam and I was in bad shape, so I started running. Once you start running, you get hooked on it. You gotta have your run every day or you don't feel good.
Well, I tried jogging for a while, but I started to do swimming, and I found that I enjoyed it a lot more. And the most important thing is that you do something you really enjoy.
When I first started riding, a short distance seemed like a big strain. 6 miles seemed rather difficult. Since that time, I've done over 100 miles one day.
Where we live now, there are mostly retired people, and a lot of them, especially the women, say, "Oh my, we envy you." "Oh, how do you do it?" I say, "You could do the same thing. It's just a matter of making up your mind you're going to do it."
It's sometimes difficult to structure one's life in order to provide adequate time for exercise. I made a deliberate choice in looking for a house, choosing a place that would allow me to walk to work.
I work for the probation department, and the type of work that I'm in, there's quite a bit of tension involved. So this is a good break for me to come out at lunchtime. I find that when I go back in the afternoon, I can do a better job.
Exercise is a very important part of the physiology of the body. It's something that I prescribe frequently, but I find also that one of the benefits is that it keeps mood swings from occurring. It keeps people from getting excessively anxious and tense, and it keeps them from getting excessively depressed. Instead of wide swings in moods, it sort of evens it out more, and it makes it easier to live with the stresses of everyday life.
I turned 30 years old and realized I wasn't going to live forever. I thought it was time I started to take care of myself. So I tried to run a mile, and I couldn't. At about that time, my company started a simple physical fitness program. Not much more than a place to change clothes and a shower room. But it provided some professional assistance, guidance for me, and the company of other people who were doing the same thing. It wasn't very long before I was hooked on it. Now I'm running 2 to 4 miles at a time and 3 or 4 times a week. And I'm even helping other people get started on the same kind of program. What I tell people is that to do your heart any good, your exercise has to be what's called cardiovascular or aerobic. That simply means that you have to get your heart up to a target heart rate and keep it there for 15 to 20 minutes, and eventually for 30 to 45 minutes. And the other thing is you really have to be consistent. Do your exercise at least 4 days a week.
There is probably no single thing you can do for yourself that will have a greater positive impact on your health than a lifetime of exercise. Regular heart-pumping exercise can play a big part in managing stress, lowering blood pressure, reducing blood fat levels, strengthening the heart muscle, and controlling weight. You don't have to run marathons to begin to get the benefits. You can start by walking around the block. Life is full of habits. Most of us get dressed the same way every morning, leave our car keys in the same place every night, and take the same route to work every day. And that's good. It's helpful to be able to do some things automatically without having to think about them. But habits can get out of hand. They can become dependencies. You've all heard the grim statistics about how these dependencies greatly increase your chances of disability or death. And they're true. So instead of talking about smoking, overeating, and alcohol one by one in the traditional manner, we are going to talk about the psychology of dependence. We will use smoking as an example of how one develops a dependency, weight control as an example of how to break a dependency, and alcohol to help you decide if a habit is becoming a dependency. Now, how do you develop a dependency? First, the behavior is prompted by social reinforcement. Someone else usually has a hand in getting you started. To begin with, the act is not reinforcing by itself. For a behavior to become a dependency, it must be repeated over and over again, often many times a day. The act must be followed immediately by a mildly pleasant sensation or good feeling which reinforces the behavior. Often the reinforcement is a momentary lift in an otherwise boring day. In this case, the lift is from a cigarette, although it could just as easily be from food or alcohol. After a while, you are not even aware of how often you are repeating the behavior, and before long, you escalate. You need more to be satisfied.
Mother runs out.
Eventually, the behavior is reinforced by a whole collection of positive associations. Now you have an idea about how habits are formed. It's not simply a matter of weak will. It's a powerful, systematic process that permeates the lives of millions of people. So let's go on to talk about how you systematically break a habit or dependency.
Why do we eat? Well, that's simple. We eat because we're hungry, right? Well, not exactly. It used to be that way. When an infant is hungry, it cries and it gets fed. So it's eating because it's hungry. But how about the concept of giving an infant a cookie when he's crying and upset? You see, we soon learn a series of social habits which allow us to eat for reasons other than being hungry. What are some of these habits? What are some of these cues? Well, we eat because it's appropriate. A scene like this. We eat because food is abundant. We eat because it's appealing, because it smells good and we think that it's going to taste good. We also eat for a series of reasons that are associated with being anxious or bored or irritated or tired. And if you can learn how to eat poorly, then you can obviously learn how to eat well. You can learn how to eat as a thin person eats. By surveying the scene, you can decide what you want to eat before you put anything on your plate. The hamburgers look good, but I think I'll pass on the buns. The salad looks fantastic and that corn is fresh. I think that the cake looks a bit too sweet, but the fruit salad looks fantastic. These are all quality choices. And while you're making them, something else occurs. You wind up being the last one in line, and that's a good thing. First, you have less time to have to deal with the food, and second, by the time you get up there, some of it may be gone. Most people who are overweight tend to eat very fast, and therefore don't allow their bodies to signal them that they're no longer hungry. One way of slowing down is to make sure that you don't have a fork or a spoon in your hand so long as there's food in your mouth. Another habit that we have to break is that of cleaning our plates. Most of us were taught, finish everything. My rule to you is always leave something. And once you've decided that you've had enough, rather than sitting there with the food in front of you, put your utensils on it, pick it up, and take it away. There's no magic diet, no way of compensating for the banana cream pie by eating more carrots and celery. What is fat? Well, it's stored energy, about 3,600 calories to the pound. And if you want to get it off, what you have to do is create an energy deficit. And that means either taking in less or putting out more. You know, it's taken you a little bit of time to put the weight on, and it's going to take you some time to take it off. When you think about losing 50 pounds, that can be kind of discouraging. But if you think about it as 10-pound chunks, and if you even chart your weight loss so that you can see what's going on each week, you can get to that first 10 pounds. The issue really isn't how fast you lose the weight. The issue is how long you keep it off. It's not how much you weigh after 6 weeks, but after 6 years. The issue is habits.
Now we've looked at smoking to see how you get a habit, and weight control as an example of how you systematically break a habit. What about alcohol? Perhaps the best thing we can do in the time we have here is to help you decide for yourself whether or not alcohol is causing a problem in your life. It's not so much a question of 1, 2, or 3 drinks a day as a matter of behavior. Alcohol in whatever form is a problem if it displaces other activities in your life which would be more productive. If you are drinking out of habit rather than deciding when to drink. If alcohol is interfering with your judgment about important choices in life.
Bye, Mom. Where are you going?
If alcohol isolates you. If you are slowly getting out of touch with family, friends, or co-workers. It's all right to enjoy a drink on a special occasion, but it's not all right if you need a drink to get ready for a special occasion. If you decide that alcohol is causing a problem in your life, or you want to stop smoking or lose weight, there's a concept that can be very important to you. That is the idea of substituting positive habits for destructive ones. You may find the same kind of release in more productive addictions like exercise, hobbies, music, or anything else that can become a habit-forming activity with a real payoff. In this introduction to the subject of health and lifestyle, we've raised some very basic questions about what we eat or drink, how we approach work, what we do to relax. Habits that most of us are pretty reluctant to change, short of a brush with death or disability. But people are changing. They're beginning to take more responsibility for their own health. And they're finding that instead of losing something, they are gaining something, a new sense of mental and physical well-being.
After 9 months, things have improved. I can now walk 2.5, 3 miles. That's a real pick-me-up in the morning. My weight's come down 40 pounds. I can now wear clothes I never would have thought of wearing before.
You can move faster, you feel younger, you feel a better attitude about yourself. You don't feel like a middle-aged fat man. You actually have a better self-image, and your whole life really changes.
We feel 100% different when we get out and we cycle several times a week. The world looks much better when you're out riding because you know that you are on your own power.
After I've swum about 10 or 20 laps, I feel like I'm just floating. I'm no longer swimming. I'm just going back and forth. It's just very, very relaxing, like being in clouds.
Lately, I think there are more times that I've been feeling relaxed or at peace. And I think it has something to do with the fact that I'm taking a little bit more time to myself or to spend with a close friend. It gives me energy for facing the world's problems again.
I think I have come to the point in life where I appreciate the small things of life. I never used to do that. You begin to see the ducks, you begin to see the shadows and the play of light at sunset on a golf course. I no longer take that kind of thing for granted.